It was a big awards dinner put on by the neoconservative think tank, the Center for Security Policy, last night in D.C. And there were a couple of notable winners. Scooter Libby took home the Service Before Self Award. In possibly related news, you'll recall that it was Scooter Libby who took the fall for the Valerie Plame is an undercover CIA officer leak, a leak that came from somewhere in the White House. Now the neocons have given him a Service Before Self Award. Also walking away with some hardware last night was the man for whom Scooter Libby was chief of staff, former Vice President Dick Cheney. Mr. Cheney is out of the hospital from his most recent round of surgery, and last night he was given the Center for Security Policy's Keeper of the Flame Award. To the extent that Mr. Cheney is still in charge of maintaining any sort of fire source, there should be no doubt that he's using it to try to burn the Obama administration. Last night, he said the new president is wrong on Iran, wrong on missile defense, even as the vice president is abroad right now talking about that. Vice President Cheney even said that President Obama is wrong to withdraw troops from Iraq, even though in Iraq, President Obama is keeping to the withdrawal plan that Bush and Cheney negotiated while they were in office.
Prime Minister Maliki met yesterday with President Obama, who began his press availability with an extended comment on Afghanistan. When he finally got around to talking about Iraq, he told the media that he reiterated to Maliki his intention to remove all U.S. troops from Iraq.
Right. You negotiated that. He's keeping to your plan. That's a problem now? The former vice president saved most of his fire last night for the other war that he started but didn't win.
We should all be concerned as well with the direction of policy on Afghanistan. Having announced his Afghanistan strategy in March, President Obama now seems afraid to make a decision and unable to provide his commander on the ground with the troops he needs to complete the mission. The White House must stop dithering while America's armed forces are in danger. Make no mistake, signals of indecision out of Washington hurt our allies and embolden our adversaries. Waffling while our troops on the ground face an emboldened enemy endangers them and hurts our cause. Recently, President Obama's advisors have decided that it's easier to blame the Bush administration than support our troops. When we deployed forces 8 years ago this month, it was to make sure Afghanistan would never again become a training ground for killing Americans. It's time for President Obama to do what it takes to win a war.
President Obama must do what it takes to win this war. Now he tells us. See, those 7 years while he was ignoring and losing Afghanistan, Mr. Cheney had what it takes to win as a secret plan that he forgot to implement. Thank God he's still around and President Obama can ask him now how to win. Mr. Cheney also really still wants to talk about torture a lot, which I'm guessing today's Republicans are not all that psyched about, politically speaking. But when Dick Cheney wants to talk about torture, you just can't stop him. He is insatiable about this stuff.
They've chosen a different path entirely, giving in to the angry left, slandering people who did a hard job very well, and demagoguing an issue more serious than any other they will face during these 4 years. No one knows just where that path will lead. On the political left, it will still be asserted that tough interrogations did no good because this is an article of faith for them, and actual evidence is unwelcome and disregarded. President Obama himself has ruled these methods out. When he last addressed the subject, he filled the air with vague and useless platitudes. To completely rule out enhanced interrogation in the future in favor of half measures is unwise in the extreme. In the fight against terrorism, there is no middle ground, and half measures keep you half exposed. For all that we've lost in the conflict, the United States has never lost its moral bearings.
The former Vice President of the United States making the difficult argument that we can only hold on to our moral bearings if we say that torture will not be out of bounds. Which makes me want to ask a follow-up question about what exactly he means by moral and by the word bearings. But Vice President Cheney won't let me interview him or any members of his family, so I don't get to ask.
George W. Bush and I handed the new president and vice president both a record of success in the war on terror and the policies to continue that record and ultimately prevail. We had been the decision makers, but those 7 years, 4 months, and 9 days without another 9/11 or worse were a combined achievement.
Even beyond the two wars they started and didn't win, the Bush-Cheney record of 8 full years, of course, does include the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil ever, for which we were left unwarned and unprepared and undefended by the government of Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney. If I had that 8-year record, I suppose, too, I would ask people to please only judge me on
7 years, 4 months, and 9 days.
If I were him, I too would try to get away with being judged on 7 years, 4 months, and 9 days, those at least that elapsed after the horrible terrorist attack that happened on my watch. Joining us now is retired Army Major General Paul Eaton. He served more than 30 years in the United States Army, and from 2003 to 2004, he oversaw the training of the Iraqi military. He's now a senior advisor with the National Security Network. General Eaton, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Rachel, thank you very much for inviting me on.
Now, I want to be clear, and I don't want to create the impression that by appearing here you implicitly agree with all the criticisms I just levied against Vice President Cheney. But I want to talk to you about the tough response that you wrote in response to Mr. Cheney's speech. You said that Mr. Cheney was an incompetent war fighter. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, first, Rachel, I've got to tell you that I'm not sure if I'm more embarrassed by the former Vice President's remarks or by the applause that he received by my fellow Americans by these egregious comments that he made. But the former Vice President, my comment that he's an incompetent warfighter, was party to the Rumsfeld-Cheney-Bush prosecution of war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And they never properly established mission. They never properly established troops to task. And they have dumped onto the American soldier the expectation that they will pull their chestnuts out of the fire. So I am very happy to see President Obama pull together a team who will do a judicious review of what we really want to achieve in Afghanistan.
When we attacked Afghanistan, it was 2001, and it was 2002 and 2003 when the Bush administration started to gear up to invade Iraq. What was the material effect on the war effort in Afghanistan by switching focus to Iraq at that time?
Well, the consistent comment, because we didn't have sufficient ground forces or all the material, the helicopters, the ground combat equipment to support both wars, that Afghanistan became the extra effort. They became the other theater, while we put all our resources into Iraq.
You were among the generals in 2006 who came out in opposition to the continued employment of Donald Rumsfeld as defense secretary. When you talk about the Bush-Cheney-Rumsfeld approach to war, what's the lesson to be learned for us as a country? Not about them as individuals, but about how we shouldn't approach war again.
When I talk about that, in effect, one pundit said what the retired generals did was respond to a crisis in our execution of our constitutional requirements, a constitutional crisis. And what we had was a Congress that surrendered power to the executive branch. We had a media go silent, and we had power inside the executive branch concentrate into the hands of 3 people: President Bush, Vice President Cheney, and the Secretary of Defense. The output of that groupthink that set into that triumvirate produced some very problematic results in Iraq, and the theater in Afghanistan suffered as a result.
Retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Eaton, thank you for your service, sir. Thanks for speaking out, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.